Meghan is nowhere to be seen, apparently, but she's in the house somewhere. There's nobody else in the house. And then the house manager says, "Meghan, Duchess of Sussex!"
Incredibly embarrassing. Those are the exact words a palace insider used to describe what happened behind closed doors. Not unfortunate, not challenging, embarrassing. And what they're about to reveal will shock you. Because today, we're exposing the truth about Meghan Markle's time as a working royal that the palace has desperately tried to keep quiet. We've got insider testimony, leaked details, and revelations so explosive that you'll question everything you thought you knew about the royal drama. But here's where it gets really interesting. What if I told you the most embarrassing moments had nothing to do with what the media reported? What if the real story is 10 times more dramatic than anything you've read in the tabloids? Before we dive in, I need to ask you something. Do you think Meghan was treated unfairly, or did she bring this on herself? Hit that like button if you're Team Meghan. Drop a comment if you think the palace was right. Because what we're about to uncover might completely change your mind. Let's get into this. The bombshell revelation. Here's what nobody's talking about. A palace insider, someone who was there, who witnessed everything firsthand, has finally broken their silence. And what they've revealed is absolutely damning. According to this source, Meghan's first official royal engagement without the Queen was a complete disaster, but not for the reasons you think. Picture this. It's 2018. Meghan's been a duchess for barely 3 months. She's about to represent the crown at a major charitable event. The palace has prepared her, given her briefings, assigned her experienced staff, and then it all falls apart. But here's what makes this absolutely fascinating.
And so I have to make a choice to move through the world as myself in spite of all the noise that's created.
The insider claims Meghan refused to follow the protocol that had been laid out for her. Not because she didn't understand it, not because she forgot, but because she thought she knew better. Wait, are you getting chills yet? Because this is just the beginning. The source describes watching in horror as Meghan essentially rewrote the entire engagement on the fly. She changed the schedule. She dismissed the prepared talking points. She turned what was supposed to be a traditional royal visit into something completely different. And the charity? They were blindsided. The palace staff? Mortified. The other royals, when they found out? Absolutely furious. But why would she do this? What was she thinking? Hold that thought, because the answer is going to blow your mind. But first, we need to understand what was really happening behind palace walls in those early days. And trust me, it's not what you've been told. The palace insiders speak out. Now, I know what you're thinking. Another anonymous source? How do we know this is real? Fair question. But here's the thing. Multiple insiders are now corroborating the same story. We're not talking about one disgruntled employee. We're talking about a pattern that emerged across different departments, different events, different situations. And the pattern is absolutely chilling. One former staff member described their first week working with Meghan like this. "I thought I was prepared. I'd worked with demanding royals before, but this was different. This was someone who fundamentally didn't understand, or didn't want to understand, what being royal actually meant." Another insider revealed something even more explosive. She would send emails at 5 a.m. with completely new plans for events that were happening that day. Plans that had taken weeks to coordinate with charities, local officials, and security teams.
And I told H that when we started dating. He goes, "I vow to always date you."
And she expected everyone to just make it happen. But here's where it gets truly shocking. The insider claims that during one particular engagement, a visit to a women's shelter, Meghan arrived with her own photographer, not the official royal photographers, not the press pool, her own personal photographer. Think about that for a second. The implications are massive, because if this is true, and multiple sources are confirming it, it means Meghan was trying to control her image in ways that completely violated royal protocol. It means she was thinking like a celebrity, not like a member of the royal family. The shelter staff apparently didn't know what to do. The palace photographers were furious. Security was confused about who this additional person was and why they had access. And Meghan? According to the insider, she seemed genuinely confused about why this was a problem. But was she really confused? Or was this a calculated move to maintain control over her narrative? The training disaster. Okay, now we need to talk about something that hasn't been publicly discussed until now. The training. Every person who marries into the royal family goes through extensive training. Kate Middleton did it. Sophie Wessex did it. Even Camilla, who had known Charles for decades, had to do it. It's not optional. It's not a suggestion. It's an absolute requirement if you're going to represent the crown. And according to insiders, Meghan's training sessions were catastrophic. One palace staffer who was involved in the training process described it like this. She would argue with everything, not in a "I want to understand" way, but in a "I know better than you" way. We'd explain why something was done a certain way, and she'd immediately tell us how it should be changed.
That love language of taking care of people also really feeds me.
Now, on the surface, that might sound like someone with initiative, right? Someone with fresh ideas trying to modernize an old institution? But here's what the insider says actually happened. She wasn't trying to modernize. She was trying to recreate her life as an actress and humanitarian celebrity, but with a royal title attached to it. The difference is crucial. Are you catching this? Because modernizing the monarchy means understanding the foundation and building on it. What Meghan allegedly did was try to tear down the foundation and replace it with something completely different. During one training session about walkabouts, those events where royals meet crowds of well-wishers, Meghan reportedly asked, "Can't we just do meet and greets like I used to do at press events?" The trainer apparently had to explain that a royal walkabout isn't about Meghan meeting fans.
Campaign right now for self-esteem is inspiring confidence in young women, and I think it's timely right now, the conversation of...
It's about the crown connecting with citizens. The focus has to be on them, not on her. According to the insider, Meghan's response was, "But if they're excited to see me, shouldn't we lean into that?" And right there, that's the fundamental misunderstanding that caused everything that followed. The palace wanted her to understand, you are not the star. You are a servant of the people using the platform of the crown. But Meghan allegedly kept thinking, I'm the star and the crown is my platform. Can you see how that creates an impossible situation? The wedding warning signs. Let's rewind for a second to the royal wedding in May 2018. Because looking back now, insiders say there were warning signs that everyone missed or chose to ignore. Remember how beautiful it all seemed? The diversity, the modern touches, the American bishop who gave that passionate sermon? Yeah, well, according to palace insiders, behind the scenes it was absolute chaos. One source revealed that Meghan wanted to rewrite huge portions of the ceremony just days before the wedding. We're not talking about minor tweaks. We're talking about fundamental changes to a ceremony that had been in planning for months. The insider claims she wanted to include personal vows that hadn't been approved by the palace. She wanted to change the music selections that had already been rehearsed. She even allegedly pushed back on the tiara she was offered, wanting a different one. Now, for those of you who don't know, and this is critical, when you marry into the royal family, you don't own the tiaras.
No, it was fantastic. It was absolutely amazing to get to know her as quickly as I did.
They're on loan from the Queen's collection. You wear what you're given. It's not a choice. It's an honor. But Meghan allegedly didn't understand why she couldn't choose. The insider describes a particular meeting where this came up. Someone had to actually explain to her that these are historic pieces owned by the crown, not accessories you pick out like you're going shopping. The look on her face. She was genuinely shocked that she couldn't just pick whichever one she wanted. And here's where it gets even more interesting. There are rumors, unconfirmed, but persistent, that Meghan wanted to wear a different tiara than the one she ultimately wore. The Queen supposedly said no. And allegedly, this led to Harry having words with staff that one insider described as shocking and completely inappropriate.
Be like Tracy Lords, Tia Carrera, you know, these.
Yeah,
those are some women.
Yeah.
The exact quote that leaked? Harry supposedly said, "What Meghan wants, Meghan gets." Now, Whether he actually said those words or not, multiple insiders confirm that there was significant tension around the tiara situation. Tension that revealed a fundamental problem. Meghan expected to have choices and control that simply don't exist in the royal system. But here's my question for you. If you were marrying into a 1,000-year-old institution, would you expect them to change their traditions for you? Or would you adapt to their way of doing things? Hit the comments and let me know, because this is where people's opinions really diverge. The charity catastrophe. All right, buckle up, because this next part is where things go from concerning to absolutely shocking. Remember when Meghan took on patronage of several charities? It seemed like such a positive step, right? She was going to use her platform for good, support important causes, make a real difference. But according to the insider, what happened behind the scenes was nothing short of a disaster. One charity executive, speaking anonymously because they're terrified of legal action, described their experience working with Meghan like this. "We were thrilled when we learned the Duchess would become our patron. We thought it would bring visibility and support to our work. Instead, it became a nightmare of last-minute changes, conflicting instructions, and feeling like we were props in her personal brand-building exercise." That's a brutal assessment, but it gets worse. The insider claims that for one particular charity visit, Meghan's team sent a list of requirements that was longer than any writer from an A-list celebrity.
There was a frenzy happening, and it almost felt like all the things we were nervous about of it getting out.
We're talking about specific lighting requirements for photos, restrictions on who could photograph the event, detailed staging instructions for where Meghan would stand, and even specifications about which of their clients or service users she would meet with. And here's the kicker. Most of these requirements came through just 48 hours before the event. The charity had to scramble. They had to change their plans. They had to essentially choreograph the entire day around Meghan's image needs rather than what would actually be most beneficial for their organization.
What I wanted to see fully in myself, they saw in me just as I see in you.
One staff member from the charity said, "We kept asking ourselves, is this visit for us or is it for her?" But let me play devil's advocate for a second, because this is where it gets really complex. Some people might argue that in today's social media age, you need compelling images and careful staging to get attention for causes. Maybe Meghan was just being smart about how to maximize impact in the digital era. The insider's response to that argument is devastating. Kate Middleton gets just as much coverage, if not more, and she's never sent a list of requirements like that. She shows up, genuinely engages with the charity's work, and lets the authentic moments create the story. The implication is clear. Meghan was manufacturing moments rather than letting them happen naturally. And apparently, the difference was noticeable to everyone involved. The breaking point. Now we're getting to the moment that insiders say was the absolute final straw for many palace staffers. It involves Archie's christening in July 2019. For those who don't remember, Meghan and Harry made the controversial decision to keep Archie's christening private. They didn't announce who the godparents were. They didn't release photos immediately. They essentially shut the press and public out of a traditionally very public royal event. And the public reaction was not great. People felt shut out. They felt that Harry and Meghan were picking and choosing when they wanted privacy and when they wanted publicity. But according to the insider, what actually happened behind the scenes was far more dramatic than anyone realized. The source claims that Meghan wanted to completely rewrite the rules for how royal babies are presented to the public. She didn't just want a private christening. She wanted to fundamentally change the expectation that royal children are, in some sense, public figures. Now, you might be thinking, good for her. Why should her baby have to be public property? And look, that's a fair point. But here's where the insider says she went wrong.
There was no better place to share this than on World Mental Health Day with Project Healthy Minds.
You can't have it both ways. You can't accept the titles, the money, the platform, the security, the access, and then say, but my child is completely private. That's not how the arrangement works. The British public funds the royal family in exchange for access to the institution, including the next generation. The insider describes a particular meeting where this all came to a head. Meghan allegedly said something along the lines of, In America, we would never expect a child to be public property like this. And one of the senior palace officials reportedly responded, "This isn't America, and he's not just your child. He's seventh in line to the British throne." Can you imagine that conversation? The tension must have been insane. According to the source, Meghan was stunned by this response.
Women all over America are fighting greasy pots and pans.
She apparently couldn't understand why being in line to the throne meant her son couldn't have the same privacy as any other child. But here's where I need you to really think about this. Is the palace's position reasonable, or is it an outdated expectation that should change? Because honestly, both sides have valid points here. The palace says, you signed up for this. You knew what you were getting into. You can't change centuries of tradition because it doesn't suit you. Meghan's position seems to be, times have changed. Children deserve privacy. Just because something has always been done a certain way doesn't mean it should continue. The staff exodus. Okay, this is where things get really uncomfortable, because we need to talk about the fact that an unusual number of staff members left their positions during Meghan's time as a working royal. Now, the public narrative at the time was that these were normal staff changes. People move on. It happens in any organization. But the insider reveals that what actually happened was far more serious than anyone publicly acknowledged. According to the source, there was a mass exodus of experienced palace staff who simply couldn't work with Meghan anymore. And we're not talking about people who work directly for her.
Habits are and how we can show up in your home for you. So yes, Jam was the origin story.
We're talking about people across various departments who had to coordinate with her office. One former staff member is quoted as saying, "I've worked for the royal family for 15 years. I've dealt with demanding personalities, but I've never felt so disrespected in my professional life." But here's where this gets more nuanced, and we need to be fair. Multiple sources have said that Meghan's communication style was very American, direct, efficient, no nonsense. In American corporate culture, that's often praised. You say what you mean. You set clear expectations. You hold people accountable. But in the British palace system, which is very formal and hierarchical, that same directness can come across as rude, demanding, and inappropriate. So were staff members genuinely being mistreated, or were they just uncomfortable with a more direct communication style than they were used to? The insider's answer to that is telling. There's a difference between being direct and being disrespectful. Other royals managed to communicate clearly without making staff feel worthless. Meghan crossed a line repeatedly. One specific incident that multiple sources have confirmed involved early morning texts. We're talking 5 or 6 a.m., with urgent demands that would turn out to be not urgent at all. Staff apparently felt like they were on call 24/7, and that their personal time and boundaries were completely disregarded. Now, Meghan's defenders might say, she was working hard and expected the same from her team. What's wrong with that? But the insider argues, royal staff are dedicated and hard-working. They've worked for the family for decades. If they're all saying someone crossed a line, maybe we should listen. The Oprah aftermath. Let's fast forward to March 2021. The Oprah interview has aired. The world is in shock. Meghan and Harry have made explosive claims. Concerns about Archie's skin color, Meghan being denied mental health support, Kate making Meghan cry, the palace lying to protect other family members while throwing them under the bus. The interview was watched by over 49 million people globally. It was one of the most significant PR disasters the royal family has ever faced. But here's what the insider says about watching that interview. Almost every single person who had worked with Meghan was screaming at their TV, because so much of what she said was misleading at best or completely false at worst. Now, that's an explosive claim. So let's break it down. The insider specifically addresses the claim that Meghan received no support or training. She had the same support and training that Kate received, probably more because of her unique situation as an American. She had access to the Queen's private secretary. She had experienced staff assigned to her. She had training sessions. She chose not to take advantage of most of it. Regarding the claim that she was denied mental health support, the insider says, "The royal family has protocols for everything, including mental health. If she had followed the proper channels, she would have received support. But she apparently wanted it on her own terms, in her own way, immediately. And that's not how institutional support works." And about the Kate story, the claim that Kate made Meghan cry during wedding dress fittings, but the press reported it the other way around. The insider's response is chilling. Multiple people were present during those fittings. Everyone knows what actually happened. The fact that she would publicly lie about something so easily verifiable tells you everything you need to know. But here's where I'm going to pump the brakes and be fair. We don't actually know what happened. We have Meghan's version. We have Palace Insider's version. We have media reports. The truth is probably more complex than anyone's willing to admit. What we do know is that Meghan felt unsupported enough to leave. Whether her feelings were based on reality or misperception, they were real to her. And we also know that Palace insiders felt she was impossible to work with. Whether that assessment is fair, or whether they were biased against her, those feelings were real to them. So who's telling the truth? Maybe everyone is, from their own perspective. The pattern emerges. Here's where we need to look at the big picture, because a pattern is emerging that's impossible to ignore. And I want you to think carefully about this pattern, because it reveals something crucial about what actually happened. Every single person who married into the royal family faced challenges. Diana struggled. Sarah Ferguson struggled. Even Sophie Wessex had a difficult adjustment period. But here's what's different about Meghan's situation. She's the only one who framed all of her difficulties as the institution's fault. Diana talked about the isolation and the pressure, but she also acknowledged her own struggles with mental health. Sarah Ferguson owned her mistakes and missteps. Sophie worked quietly to improve after her early errors. Meghan's narrative, according to the insider, has been, "I did everything right, and they were all against me." But is that realistic? Is it possible that in a complex situation involving culture clash, institutional rigidity, media hostility, and personal adjustment, only one side was wrong? The insider argues. If you talk to anyone who actually worked with her, and I mean anyone, they'll tell you the same stories. At what point do we acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, some of this was on her? But here's the counter-argument that we have to consider. What if everyone who worked with her was biased from the start? What if, as a biracial American woman entering a very white, very British institution, she was never going to be given a fair chance no matter what she did? What if the embarrassing mistakes the insider describes were actually a black woman being held to completely different standards than white women in the same position? That's not a comfortable question, but it's one we have to ask. Because multiple studies have shown that women of color, particularly black women, are judged more harshly in professional settings. They're seen as aggressive, when white women doing the same things are seen as assertive. They're criticized for not smiling enough, for being too confident, for taking up space. So when Palace insiders describe Meghan's behavior as embarrassing, are they describing genuine protocol violations? Or are they describing a woman of color not conforming to white British expectations of how she should behave? This is the question that divides people more than any other aspect of this story. The truth about Megxit. So let's talk about what actually happened in January 2020 when Harry and Meghan announced they were stepping back as senior royals. The public narrative was that they wanted more privacy, wanted to protect their mental health, wanted to raise Archie away from the spotlight. But according to Palace insiders, the reality was much more calculated. The source claims that Harry and Meghan had been planning their exit for months. They'd been setting up business entities. They'd been in discussions with American agents and managers. They'd been preparing to monetize their royal status. And then they announced their decision on Instagram without telling the Queen first. Let that sink in for a second. They announced to the world that they were stepping back from royal duties before informing the Queen, Harry's grandmother, and the literal head of the institution. The insider describes the palace reaction. Fury doesn't even begin to cover it. The Queen felt disrespected. Charles was livid. William reportedly didn't speak to Harry for days. But here's where the insider's account gets really interesting. They thought they could be part-time royals. They wanted to keep their titles, keep their patronages, keep their security, but also make money and live in America. They genuinely believed the family would agree to that. Of course, we know how this ended. The Queen said no. You're either working royals or you're not. You can't be half in, half out. Meghan and Harry chose out. But according to the insider, they were shocked and offended by the Queen's position. They allegedly expected her to be more flexible, more understanding of their unique situation. The source says they kept talking about how they could modernize the monarchy by doing things differently. What they didn't understand is that you can't modernize an institution by destroying what makes it function in the first place. Now here's where I need to challenge that. Is that really true? Can institutions never change? Must tradition always trump evolution? Because plenty of monarchies around the world have modernized. The Swedish royal family has adapted. The Dutch royals have evolved. Why couldn't the British monarchy find a way to accommodate Harry and Meghan? The insider's answer: those monarchies made careful, gradual changes. They didn't have members trying to blow up the whole system from the inside while also cashing in on their titles. Ouch. The embarrassing legacy. So we come back to that word, embarrassing. After everything we've discussed, all the incidents, all the perspectives, all the complexity, what does the insider mean when they describe Meghan's royal efforts as incredibly embarrassing? Here's how the source explains it. It's embarrassing because she had every advantage. She married a prince who was beloved by the public. She had the support of the Queen, who genuinely wanted her to succeed. She had experienced staff ready to help her. She had the sympathy of millions of people who wanted to see her break barriers. And she squandered it, not because the institution was racist, though of course there are issues with racism in Britain that need addressing. Not because the media was unfair, though they absolutely were at times, but because she fundamentally couldn't or wouldn't understand that being a working royal requires service and sacrifice, not celebrity and self-promotion. That's the insider's bottom-line assessment. Meghan had every opportunity to succeed, and she failed because she approached the role with the wrong mindset. But let's hear the other side one more time. What if the institution's definition of success was unreasonable? What if expecting someone to erase their own identity and become a bland representative of an outdated system is the real embarrassment? What if Meghan's failure was actually her refusal to be diminished? These are the questions that make this story so compelling, because there's no clear answer. Both sides have valid points. Both sides have legitimate grievances. The insider sees embarrassing mistakes and missed opportunities. Meghan sees an oppressive institution that tried to break her. And somehow, both perspectives can be true simultaneously. What's undeniably true is this: it ended badly for everyone. The royal family lost one of their most charismatic members. Meghan's reputation is permanently divided. Harry is estranged from his family. The charities that could have benefited from years of their work lost out. Nobody won. Everybody lost. And that might be the most embarrassing thing of all. What this means for the future. So where does this leave us? What does this story tell us about the future of the monarchy? Because this isn't just about Meghan Markle. This is about whether an ancient institution can survive in the modern world. The insider's perspective is pessimistic. If someone as polished, educated, and sophisticated as Meghan Markle couldn't make it work, who can? What woman is going to want to marry into this family knowing what happened to her? That's a fair point. The next generation of potential royals is watching. Princess Charlotte, Prince Louis, potentially Archie and Lilibet if they ever take on royal duties. They're all going to need partners eventually. Who's going to sign up for that, knowing how it went for Meghan? But here's another perspective. Maybe Meghan's experience will force the institution to change. Maybe it will become more supportive, more flexible, more understanding of different backgrounds and communication styles. The insider scoffs at this. The palace doesn't change because of embarrassing failures. It doubles down on tradition. That's how it survived for 1,000 years. But is that really sustainable? In an era of social media, cancel culture, and demands for accountability. Can any institution survive by just insisting, "This is how we've always done it"? I genuinely don't know the answer. But I know this. The Meghan situation exposed cracks in the royal foundation that can't be ignored anymore. Young people increasingly question the value of monarchy. Countries are removing the British monarch as their head of state. The institution faces an existential crisis, and the incredibly embarrassing situation with Meghan Markle might be remembered not as her failure, but as the moment when the monarchy's inability to evolve became undeniable. Final thoughts. Here's what keeps me up at night about this whole situation. Everyone lost. The insider who described Meghan's efforts as incredibly embarrassing probably feels vindicated. They probably feel like they were right all along about her not being suited for royal life. But what did they win? A more isolated, less diverse, less dynamic royal family. An institution that's even more out of touch with modern Britain than it was before. Meghan probably feels like she escaped an oppressive system that tried to destroy her. She's living life on her own terms in California with her husband and children. But what did she lose? Relationships with Harry's family. The platform to support causes on a global scale that only comes with being a working royal. The chance to actually change the institution from within. Harry thought he was protecting his wife and family, but he's now estranged from his brother, his father, and the institution he spent his entire life serving. The British public wanted to embrace a modern, diverse royal family. Instead, they got division, drama, and deep questions about whether the monarchy has any future at all. So when that palace insider uses the word embarrassing, I think they're right, but not in the way they mean. What's truly embarrassing is that nobody, not Meghan, not the palace, not the media, not the public, was able to find a way to make this work. What's embarrassing is that in 2025, with all of our supposed progress and enlightenment, we still can't figure out how to bridge cultural differences, accommodate diverse perspectives, and create institutions that serve everyone. What's embarrassing is that we're still having this conversation at all. Thanks for sticking with me through this deep dive. And remember, the truth is rarely simple, people are complex, and institutions are only as good as their willingness to evolve. Until next time, keep questioning, keep thinking, and keep demanding better from the people and institutions that hold power.